Hi and welcome. Chapter 13 on the MDriven education steps. So in this session we're going to focus on trying to draw some graphic on the screen. And this could be useful for doing simple diagrams or really indicators to users on what the information is currently like. The normal way is that you use the UI widgets like edit boxes and texts to display information and images as we saw in chapter 12. But every once in a while we need some graphics to do stuff, to show stuff. So we're gonna look at a couple of different ways to do that. I'm gonna start by creating a view model for showing this, and defining the data that will be building up the diagram. So add a new view model, and I'm gonna set this to car, but this won't be rooted in anything. It will show for all cars, and the idea for an example is to show a small diagram over the distribution of cars within brands. So I'm gonna call this view model cars and brands. I'm gonna add a global action for show for this. So in order to show this, of course, we will need a list of all the cars. So I'm gonna just do a car all instances. So this is basically the data that we need. And yeah, what we're gonna do is add the brand to this and the sort of registration number here. I'm gonna drop that one. So I'm gonna test that this is okay before moving on. So that shows up. Good. The first strategy that I'm going to show is to simply render out some HTML based on what the data we have. And in order to show that, you can add a generic column. I'm going to say that this is HTML, and we need a way to instruct the system to not just write out the text in this field, but rather to interpret it as HTML. We're gonna make this static and gonna add a tagged value to this column. So in order to make sure that we have all the tagged values defined in the wiki, I'm gonna press this refresh. And since we are now on a column, this available tags are sorted based on the context. So these are the tags that we can set on columns. These are all the tags, but not all are okay on columns. So this is the one that we're after in this case. Data is HTML. So now I'm saying that this is the tag I want to use, and I'm going to add that. I'm going to set the value on that tag to true. So what this means is that data here will not be presented as its value, but rather fed to the browser as HTML. So what does that mean? Well, if I just do a simple string like this, it will still just render it as text because this is actually valid HTML. But if I were to do something more like a div with a style that has a background of yellow, and I end that div starter tag, and I also need a div end tag, and I switch back. I can see that it did not write exactly what I gave it. It's instead interpreted this as HTML. So that gives us some hope that we can use data to build a string like this. And what do I mean by that? Well, for starters, we could sort of see what happens if we do just another one beneath it and add these strings together. So this is one way of building rows. And knowing that, we could potentially use the car all instances and collect over each such car, giving it a loop variable C. And just breaking the string here and putting in the registration number, for example. And this will be a collection of strings and not a string per se. So what we actually want to do is to collect all these this list of strings to build one string. And there's a couple of ways of doing that, but the one that comes to mind is as separated list. It builds one string out of potentially many strings, and it gives me a let's see if I'm on this one. I can check on the wiki what it says. So it gives me an option to say what should be between each string. In my case, I'm not that interested in having anything in between, so I can just leave that empty. So now I get an HTML of all my cars. Good. Now I need to figure out a good way to actually do a diagram in HTML. So maybe we should take some inspiration from the web. So this is more advanced than what I had in mind. These actually use JavaScript libraries, and we can do that as well. But for simple things, displaying simple data, it might be overkill to bring such a thing in currently. So, but that's definitely an option if that is what we want to do. So doing advanced diagramming, it's probably a good idea. So this is a bit more what I had in mind. It's able to draw something using only HTML and CSS. I'm going to start with that. What if I were to take all of this and simply append it to things that I already had. Of course I want this to be a string, so I'm gonna put it in this between hyphens like this. Okay, that was not what I expected. It's making use of some CSS that we probably don't have yet because I'm in a bit of a rush. Let's see where they have it. Let's see. Okay. So this is the CSS that's required, but it's described in a different format called less. So in order for our browser to understand this, we need to retype it in strict CSS. Oh no, maybe there's a converter for this. Convert less to CSS online. This online tool will compile your less code. Okay, that's my less code. Compile it. And this is the CSS code. Okay. So what I can do is to, as a part of my HTML, send in a style starter tag and a stop style, and between these send in the CSS. Now I need to be wary of changing the single hyphens to double hyphens in order to not confuse the string interpretation here. Saving that. So now I'm able to produce something within my application, and of course these values should be made based on the data I have. I want to count how many BMWs versus Teslas there are, and have these the number of bars should be the number of brands of cars. So as you can imagine, this is not really an impossible mission. It's just a bit of having this work being done inside here. So let's figure out what the data actually is that we want to iterate over here. Instead of working in text here, we're gonna make it a bit easier for us and just see the data with our own eyes initially. So this is car all instances, but maybe that's not actually what we want. We want to be able to group the cars, and there's an operator called group by. And group by what? Well, we can call a loop variable for C, that will be for each car, and we want to group it on the brand of car. What we will get back then is a collection of brand of car and then a list of the number of cars. So that's good. So what we actually want to do with, let's be happy with that for now. And then we get an error because all car has type car, but expected was brand of car and list of collection. So this has to do with us declaring this list as being of car, but we can actually say that we will leave it empty and derive type from referring column. Because then we can see here that we have brand of car. So that will be the first self dot brand of car, so we can get the name from here. And the second you can do self list, so it's a list of cars, and what we want to do with that, we can say to get the size of that, this number of cars of brand. And if we save that, we see that we got 1 Volvo and 2 BMWs and 1 Tesla. Here we actually want some kind of percent. Yeah. So how can we calculate the percent from this size? Well, it goes back to us dividing this with car all instances and the size of that. And then we'll get the fraction, but we can take that times 100. And we can round that to 0 decimals, and we can do a string of it and append a percentage sign like this. So then we know that we have 25% Volvos and 50% BMWs. So now we know sort of how we want to go about to inject our data in the bar chart. Namely, we want to do this, and well, I guess we can do a bit better even, because now we do a bit of logic down here and a bit of logic up here. Maybe we can fix things directly up here to make it more compact. So the first thing that we want to do in this expression is to not only collect the, well, now we have grouped it, but now that we have grouped it, we want to collect certain things. So there's an operator called collect. So this acts on the resulting tuple that comes from group by, and that tuple will have the brand of car as the first attribute, and we take the name, and then we can build a new tuple and having the other expression with the percentage and everything straight in here. So I'm going to grab this expression, make a copy of that, and say that that's actually what we want to do up here. The only thing is that it's not in context of self, but in context of tuple. So that will return a collection of two strings, one called name and the other one part2. And this is an effect of the tuples. Whenever it's not super simple what it's going to call something, it's going to call it part and then an index number. So now we got errors because this one is no longer valid, because it expects this tuple that ends up in the grid down here is just name, and just part 2. Alright, so what we have learned is that this is the expression that actually brings the data in a good format for us. So I can use this expression within this HTML. I want to break the grid and the HTML here with a plus, and I want to act on my own things according to this. So now I have an expression that will give me this tuple, and I can collect over that again. I'm gonna call the loop, I'm gonna make a new row here too. So these are my values. I'm gonna call the loop variable values. And as I did before, the result will be multiple strings, but I'm not really interested in multiple strings. I just want the one string. So I'm gonna take it as a separated list and then continue with the last of the HTML. And basically what I want to send back is a string that has this value, but it should not have a hard-coded value here. Instead, it should have my values dot part 2, and it should not have hard-coded value here. Instead, it should have values dot name, and it should have not have hard-coded values here. It should be name, and not here. It should be part 2. And then I'm not that interested in these hard-coded ones, so I'm going to remove those. So now I got a diagram over Volvo, BMW and Tesla. And this also has the effect that everything is sort of live. If I were to add or change brand of a car, that would show up in real time, I believe. So let's see if I do a new car seeker and I log in as Now I'm an administrator, so I can do a new car. I can call it 123, and I can say that this is also a Volvo, and whenever I save that, and this one was updated, and if I change it to BMW instead, this one is updated and the numbers are updated. Good. So this is one way to build the HTML string in your application. It's not necessarily the recommended way, but it's a simple enough strategy that enables you to solve some issues really unintrusive and with very little overhead. So I'm going to remove these yellow car lines, and also say that this is a bar chart for cars and brands. I can also then now remove this, because my main purpose for that was to have something to help me understand what data I needed. And I can sort of allow this to take most of the screen and remove the presentation from it. And maybe, since this is not gonna be able to actually change any data, I can remove the sidebar from this. And I now have a bar chart for cars and brands. What's not super good is that I have a lot of code in the view model, and I can easily shift this code in snippets back to something where it belongs better, maybe in a common class, or for example, I could have the CSS for this in one attribute, derived attribute, or maybe even as data to be able to change it in runtime, and then only have these few things in the view model to actually set things up. Or even so, I could have the whole data for building this diagram as a derived attribute, or an attribute or a derived attribute it has to be, because it's going to react to other data in a class. But let's leave it like this for now. So this was one way to get graphics into your application, a small type of diagram. I'm gonna do a copy of this and paste. Then I'm expecting to find the copy of it here. So this is the copy. So I'm gonna change this to cars and brands SVG. SVG is the graphics language of the web, really. This is not SVG, so we're gonna redo this with another strategy. I'm gonna add a global action for show for this also. Currently just verifying that we have that one, but it shows the same HTML. So how do we do SVG then? Good question. Okay, so I googled a bit and found something on CodePen that looks like this. It's sort of in the vicinity of what we want, so I'm gonna go ahead and copy that. As one thing that we note is that this is actually also HTML. SVG renders, or HTML renders SVG data straight up, but it's at the same time a different strategy to get graphics. And what's good with this strategy is that we can use the same graphics in VPF for the other prototyper if we would want to do that. But if we're always in HTML, it's not a big issue. We can do it like this. So let's try to first grab the CSS for this and replace our existing CSS. And not to wreck too many things at once, we're gonna add this HTML separately to see if we get what we need. So that's more data. Saving that, heading back to the application. Where were we? Here. Yeah, so that looks as promised. So what we want to do now is to make use of our data. Inside these things. So these are apparently the x-axis values. Fair enough. We probably want to so we see here they have a pixel value counting upwards. So we need some good way to do that. So we're gonna take this first part and end it there, and then make a new part of things down here. And this new part is gonna be repeated according to our data. but it's not this way any longer, it's another way. It's going to start by removing this and saying that it's let's see, where does it start? Yeah, okay, maybe I did that wrong. So it's this. But this value sort of increases with a count. Good. So we need to be able to see how many we are and how would we go about that. We can simply send in. We know that yeah, let's do it like this. We're gonna take this list of car all instances and put it in a temporary variable called let cars be equal to car all instances in this expression. So I'm gonna do a parenthesis around this whole expression. So now I can use cars instead of car all instances. So there's a few good things that comes from that, and namely that I can do it like that. But another good thing is that I can easily that was not actually what I wanted. So I want something that grows for each brand that I get. So I'm gonna do that on the values here, because I know on the values that I get a name of the brand. I can collect brand of car. I'm gonna add a new thing to my collection, which is checking the brand of car. All instances of those, and checking the index of this one. That will give me a number that increases for each brand of car, and that corresponds to the x-axis. I'm going to check how much it's going to update. 25, 59, 93, so it's approximately so that's the 25 plus 9, 35 between each step, and multiply this with 35. Yeah, not the brand of car, but the result of the index of. So now in values, I got a part 3, which is an int 32. So that's good. I can take the values and don't want this hard-coded value then. Instead I want the values part 3, and since that comes out as an integer, but now we're pasting strings, I'm gonna do an as string on that. Good. And then this one is actually the label, so that will be the brand. I'm gonna take the values, the brand of that was the name, right? So I had already resolved the name of the brand of car to name. So that will take care of my sort of ticks down here. So I guess all of these are sort of handled. Let's save and see what we get. So we get, BMW and Tesla. We might want a dummy one to move things in. Let's see about that a bit later. And this is the y-axis, and that's sort of okay to be hard-coded, even if let's see, did it only go to 12%? So we're not that interested in that. We want to go to 100, and maybe we also want it to show these are going downwards because the coordinate system begins in the upper left corner, so this is 0, 0. Let's remove all these. So now we have only 3 values. First one being 0, next one will be 50. And we're gonna move that one down to between these two, of course. So this is 24, and this first one is at 450. 450 minus 24, what's that? 425 split in 2, 212. Something like that. So that's the axis, and then we have the data here. So I'm gonna go do pretty much the same, almost. Gonna end that string and then add a new string. So here we have two numbers that move, or are the three numbers that move. Start by dropping a few of them. And what we want is this. So on the x-axis we want to move about, we're gonna add, looks like 34 for each. Yeah, 35, that's okay. And yeah, let's see, we have one y and one height. What's the difference? It's a rectangle and it starts, gets a x and a y, so that's gonna be the sort of bottom of it, but I don't understand why they change both. Okay, whenever you don't understand, it's usually easy if you're allowed to see. So I'm just gonna close that and see where we are. So here's a double one because of overlap. I haven't removed the old ones. Just gonna try and remove. Gonna keep the last one for reference. So why do we only get one? Can I inspect this? I can see that I get one that starts. Now I sort of don't resolve it. It sends in the value, the string as such. That's not correct. So this should break the string and then start the string. So now I get the three ones, but now I need a height. Okay. So the height is not given in percent, but instead we're gonna remove the percentage sign from the data, and then we're gonna send in, let's see what happens if we break the string, send in values part 2. Okay, so the thing is that these need to be in relation to each other in order to be grounded at. Okay, so we start with a y is where they start, and then we need a height to let them continue down here. Fair enough. So now we can, in order to make this a bit we need the number twice to use it in calculations. I'm gonna add some row breaks here to make it easier for me to read. I'm gonna indent these two over here. So for this one, I'm gonna let the y equals the value of this in so the first thing is I'm gonna send back the, yeah, I guess I don't need to do it like this. I can just have it. Now I have it as a number anyways. And then I need to do an as string on this value in order to add them. But the good thing is that I now can do a break the string here and do like a 450 minus this number and as string on the height. Yeah, and now my scale is off, but I think I'm gonna leave that for your for you to practice on. Yeah, so, or rather this is, since I'm only using a percentage value and my whole values go to 450, I should probably multiply it by 450 instead of just 100 as I did before when it was a percentage value. So now it's more to yeah, and also I probably need to invert it because now 0% is here and 50 and 100% is there. So yeah, there's a few issues with this UI for sure. But in order to, we're gonna show you how to move this into a sort of derived property instead. So we can put that on yeah, tell you what, we will wait with that. Now we at least have been able to draw some graphics on screen with data dependent graphics on screen. So the trick is to first find how you want it to look and mocking it up in a web browser so that you can see it. And once you know, with some mock data, you can replace that data with data from your model, and then you would be fine. So try that for a bit, and I'll be back.